warm welcome to another BBA webinar. Thank you for joining us today. The topic of today's discussion is all about adhesives and sealants, challenges faced by players within the sector. We will talk about BASA's role in supporting the sector and the role that BBA can play in supporting BASA's members. Today, a few housekeeping points before I go into and introduce the panelists to you. The webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded soon after the end of the webinar. Please feel free to share the link with your colleagues once the webinar link is uploaded. Also, just a reminder that our chat feature is enabled. So if you have any questions, please feel free to pop us a message through the questions tab, and the panelists will be happy to answer your questions towards the end of the discussion. I'd now like the panelists to introduce themselves, as I'm sure they'll do a better job than I will. Lorna, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yes, so good morning. My name is Lorna Williams. I'm the CEO of the British Adhesives and Sealants Association, a role I've been doing since 2015. I've been actually involved with the association as working for a member company now for nearly 30 years. So I like to think I've got a reasonably sound experience of the sector and the challenges that the sector has had to face.
Thank you for that, Lorna. Dennis, would you now introduce yourself, please? Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon to everyone. I am Dennis Chacko. I work as a sales manager for British Board of Agreement, covering for southeast of England, and also at the moment I'm the interim head of sales. I've been with BBA for last 5 years, and I was with construction industry for almost 20 years plus, and I'm very pleased to be here.
Thank you, Dennis. I believe Lorna has a short presentation for us, so I will share the presentation that Lorna will take us through. Just sharing my screen. Please give me a thumbs up when you see the screen. Great. Thank you. 1 second. Great. Over to you, Lorna. Okay,
if I can just give everybody sort of a brief first of all about me. No, that's correct. So I'm an independent consultant for the chemicals and materials sector. And as part of that consultancy, my company run the secretariat for the British Adhesives and Sealants Association. So that's BASA. And I'm actually now appointed as the Chief Executive Officer of the association, working with Council to try to make sure that we are serving the sector and our members in respect of regulatory, technical, and also business activities. I have a background in material science, so that's always a good cop-out for me when I'm saying if it's a difficult chemistry question. I'm a materials scientist, so I'm more interested in the bulk properties of materials. And as I said, I've got a lot of experience in technical and commercial roles working for BASA member companies. So part of that means I've been heavily involved in UK, European and international standardisation, heavily involved in CE marking under the Construction Products Directive and Regulation. And I'm also actively involved with other European national associations within FICA, our European association, and also I'm the Secretary of the Alliance of Chemical Associations in the UK. Next slide, please. So that's all about me. I thought I'd now give you a little bit about who BASA are. So we were formed in 1983 when the British Adhesives Manufacturers Association and the Sealant Manufacturers Conference decided to come together to form BASA. We've got approximately 95 member companies. About 70% of those are adhesives and sealant suppliers, and we feel we cover about 85% of the sector. Our mission and what we really pride ourselves in doing is to act as a voice for the industry and to represent their interests of the manufacturers of adhesives and sealants and the related supply chain, and to promote the sector. So primarily we're offering guidance on technical and compliance issues to our member companies. We're presenting them with networking opportunities, virtual and in person now, and also providing our members with support services like free business support lines, guidance on standards, how to comply with standards, which standards they need to be looking at. And so we do work through British standards to set and monitor high standards for our products. And we also work with the European Association, FICA, so that's the European Adhesives and Sealants Association, on European issues, which even though we're not in the EU, we are still in Europe, and so therefore anything that happens in respect to adhesives and sealants legislation is a European issue. Did I have another slide, or was that it for that? And so we support members. Yeah, we support members really by making sure that we can help them to adopt good practice, to meet their technical and regulatory obligations. We like to think we can provide free or low-cost industry training and seminars on things like poison centres, Article 26 inquiries if anybody's into UK REACH. We provide business services as a free benefit for our members, so there's a free helpline. We give our raw material supply members promotion opportunities. We give technical guidance either on a sort of an overall basis for all members, or if specific members have got regulatory or technical questions, we'll answer those directly for them. We're affiliated to FICA, and also we're members of the Construction Products Association. And we also work with Food Contact, Value Chain Alliance, Alliance of Chemical Associations, and are involved in various lobbying and advocacy activities. So I think that's sort of the brief, sort of who am I and who are BASA.
Great, thank you very much. I will just stop sharing the screen so I can see all of you again. Can you, I'm guessing you guys can't see my screen now, can you?
Yeah, we cannot, yeah.
Great, thank you, Lorna, for taking us through that. Dennis, my first question to you, I do have a few set of questions for the panelists. My first question to you, Dennis, in terms of product testing and certification, how can the BBA support manufacturers of adhesives and sealants?
That's a great question. Thank you, Shumaila. So generally, the adhesives and sealants are part of the system itself, and there are very few, I would say, who has actually got a BBA certification. I will more explain about BBA certification and how it could benefit and help a little later. So how can BBA help to the manufacturers of adhesives and the sealants is if they have the BBA agreement certificate. We consider the BBA agreement certificate as a gold standard, and it shows that the product is fit to perform. And if that manufacturer choose the certification route, then that is what it is showing to the industry, that the product that has been certified is being validated by an independent assessor, and it is the technical documents are being validated, and the product, what it says, it does. Now, if the manufacturers choose not to go for a certification, then we can help the client by doing the testing of their product to support their technical data, and it could be various different testing we can do, whether it is a weather tightness or to the passage of wind, rain or snow or runoff water or dust into the interior building, or we can even check with the durability of the product. There are lots of tests that we can perform on the adhesive and sealant sides of it, whether it is tensile strength or a bond strength, peel strength, you can name enormous numbers of it. So that is one part of it. At the same time, we support the manufacturers in the management system, whether they want to go for ISO 9001, ISO 14001, 45001, we can help in those areas as well. Or if somebody wants to go beyond and wants to have some installer scheme to be approved by BBA, then we can support in that respect as well.
Thank you for that, Dennis. Lorna, would you be able to give us a snapshot of the regulatory environment within the sealants and adhesive sector?
Yes, of course. It's quite complicated. I think if you've got anybody on the call who's been involved in UKCA marking over the last 2 or 3 years, I think head in hand for a lot of that time. So of course, I think most people understand that that's a product regulation. And what you have to realise is that because adhesives and sealants are all chemical-based products, there's an awful lot more than just the actual technical performance of the final product or the performance of the sealant or the adhesive in the system. And so we have to also fall under chemical legislation. And as a result of leaving the EU, we are on a dual system and starting to see divergence. So you've got things like classification, labelling and packaging regulations, which are now different or separated in the UK, or GB, rather than the EU. So there's a potential there that you could have a divergence, and you might need to actually separate your packaging of product that's for the GB market compared to what's for Northern Ireland and the EU. So that is a cost, it's extra warehousing, and so there's all sorts of different things going on there. There's UK REACH and EU REACH, which have started off from the same point, but they could potentially diverge, whether that's by accident or deliberate. And I think, you know, a lot of people have commented on the fact that as a downstream user industry, where we are buying most of our raw materials from the EU, then UK REACH is a real challenge. And so certainly from a perspective of what BASA are trying to do, we're trying to work with the other associations, chemical associations, to try to get the government to rethink that UK REACH regulation. So we've got authorisations and restrictions which are going on still in the EU and will potentially also happen in GB, which will affect everything. You've got things like the environmental aspects, plastics tax. Most of the adhesives and sealants are packaged in plastics, maybe because they have to be. There is some in tin or whatever else, but so there's a plastics tax element to that, which increases costs. You've got the extended producer responsibility, which is coming in, which is going to introduce reporting restrictions or reporting requirements for the packaging, because a lot of our products potentially can end up as household waste. So even if you're selling it to a business, if that potential is that it's going to end up in household waste, you're going to come under the UK EPR regulations. I've mentioned construction products regulation, but you've also got food contact legislation. I mean, I know we're talking about construction products here, but a third of adhesives go into packaging applications. So that's food contact and non-food contact applications.
Dennis, coming on to you, what is your take on this, and how would you say the BBA can support BASA members?
Yes, so to understand this little better, let me just give a brief synopsis of the British Board of Agreement itself, what BBA does. So BBA was established almost 60 years back by the government just to show that the manufacturers, when they have their technical document, it needs to be verified by a third-party independent body. And that's what BBA was doing for all these years. So any manufacturers, when they have a technical data, it needs to have a support from a third-party independent body to verify those particular data. Now, over the years, BBA becomes self-sustained, and it has its own inspection team, it has its own testing laboratory, and combining all that factor, we were able to assess a product to say that the product is fit to purpose. So hence, when you get a BBA agreement certificate, that's the tagline, that the product is fit to perform. So what you get out of BBA is that you get a third-party independent certification that helps to mitigate your risk, that helps to put a value to your product. Not only that, that also helps into enter into a UK market as a compliant product. Not only that, the BBA agreement certificate, it is well known not only in UK but around the world. If you use the agreement certificate in Middle East or in some of the Asian countries where there are not adequate standard to cover all the aspects of the application, you use a BPS agreement certificate over there, and it is well respected and very well valued in those countries as well. So it is just not a limited area or scope where you can think of having an agreement certificate, but you can go beyond that. And the same applies to the testing reports as well. When you get a BBA test report, it has got its own credibility. So that's why I encourage the manufacturers of adhesives or sealants or anybody else within the construction industry that they should strive to do more so that they can prove that their product stands above the other products manufacturers or above the non-standard product. Let's put it that way. Now, for over 50 years, BBA have been helping the construction and manufacturing industries to build confidence, to get that solutions which is created and designed and implemented throughout the supply chain. Now, we believe that our clients or the manufacturers are proactive innovators who are driven to excel in their field. And BBA supports that drive to transform the construction industry or the industry they are working in by providing the services that are based on credible, quality-driven output, all of which is expected within the industry. So from the BPS perspective, how we can help is that you get within one umbrella the testing, the inspection, the certification all together. So because when you come to BPA, you are just not coming for an agreement certificate, which I always say is the best, but you can come to BPA to get your product tested because we are independent laboratory that can do the testing for you. You can come to us for your management information system. So you can get your FPCs, you can get your ISOs done from us, we can help in that way, or you can get your approved installer scheme for that matter. And the third is the assessment document. We can do assessment of your technical data, whether it is for UKCA or whether it is for any other matter you want that documents to be assessed by a third-party body. We can help you in doing that. So there are so many ways you can come to BPA where we can support you, that you can show to the construction industry that you are a company who are looking forward to take into the building control or the warranty bodies or the developers or the architect's requirement into place, and your product is fit to perform.
Dennis, that was very comprehensive. Staying with you, what do you think are some of the challenges which face the sector currently?
Yes, so as I previously mentioned, that I do not think that many of the manufacturers within the adhesive and sealants industry have got their certification done on their own, and there could be many reasons for it, and also that their applications is probably more limited to the combination of the system itself or as a packaging. So one of the challenges, like, should we need to create a separate certificate just for adhesive and sealant that have a number of tick boxes to say that it is fit to perform, or can we just get them into more standardized version so that it is much easier for them to get to show that the product is fit to perform? There are some challenges with regards to the CE marking, with regards to the testing, and all those things can be maintained, or it can be addressed and can come out with a probable solution for it. So there's always a challenge in any industry as you talk, but adhesive and sealant, the other challenge which I look at it is, normally the focus of the construction industry is where the integrity of the structure is, whether it will collapse or big structure, external, the cladding and all those things. But at the same time, the adhesive and sealants plays an equally viable and very important role in the building construction. Okay, when it is internal, probably you can say it is less structural, but when it becomes an external part, then it is used around the windows or any other joints, then it becomes an integral part of the system. So we need to make sure that particular adhesive or sealant that is used goes through that rigorous assessment process, goes through that rigorous checklist, so that everybody feel that the product that is being tested and assessed and verified is reliable and durable.
Interesting. My next question is to Lorna. Lorna, what according to you are the challenges that you think are facing your sector?
I think the whole UKCA marking has been very challenging, just in terms of how you can get it tested, whether there is actual capacity to do that, a misunderstanding in the market about what do you do about historical test reports and things like that. And I think, the fundamental issue that I have is that CE marking is about removing barriers to trade. So for me, I don't see that you actually need UKCA marking in that same way, because it's not 26, 27 member states and removing those barriers to trade. And I think the problem that you have is that CE marking is not about being fit for purpose. And we've all talked about this before, where you used to have BBA certification, where you'd agreed what you were going to test, and you were going to test all the properties, and you were going to say yes, it was going to be fit for purpose. And so I think that's the big challenge, is that understanding of the fact that CE marking is not about performance, it's not about quality, it is just about meeting a set of requirements that remove barriers to trade. And so I think we have to sort of get beyond that to understand, do you want a mark of performance? Do you want a mark of quality? Or do you want just to continue the myth that is CE marking? But that's a personal opinion of mine on CE marking. There are others who share that. And I think that is part of the issue with that, is that you don't want to have different manufacturers making different claims about their products, and picking and choosing which aspects are declared, and you want to be all using the same technical standards to define the quality and performance of your product, so that a specifier understands that if he specifies you use this type of adhesive or sealant, that is what gets used, and that it's the right product for a particular set of substrates or a particular joint, or a particular set of circumstances or particular durability or anything like that. So I think that's the biggest challenge, is to try to make sure that everybody's using the same language, and that everybody is understanding what CE marking actually means and is complying with that. And I think then, when you layer on top of it all of the other regulation, then it's that is an aspect that is quite difficult to deal with. And so I guess when you then get to sustainability and more eco-related aspects, it gets much harder, I think, to be able to try to work out what to do, because it's not just about a set of performance requirements, because at the end of the day, if you're putting a sealant in a building, it's got to be able to withstand whatever elements it's going to be exposed to. It needs to be able to accommodate movement. It would need to be resistant perhaps to UV if it's on the outside of a building. It might need to be perform over a wide temperature range. But then when you start to add in requirements for sustainability, you've got to maintain that durability and maintain that performance whilst changing everything else. And so I think that's the biggest challenge, I think.
That you touched on sustainability. I understand sustainability is now becoming a thing. How would you say the sector is becoming more sustainable?
I think there's kind of different sort of elements of it. You have to look at it kind of like in the broadest sense. It's the ability to maintain or support a process continuously over time. So clearly, if the costs of doing things differently are so high that you go out of business and you have no product, that's not sustainable. If the costs of the use of the raw materials, if you're depleting a certain, if it's an oil-based, if it's petrochemicals or whatever else, and you're depleting those resources, that's not sustainable either. And the difficulty when you start to look at sustainability is that there's kind of lots of buzzwords like debond on command. People seem to think that adhesives and sealants are responsible for the fact that you can't disassemble something. And I think it's easy to lose sight of the fact that anything can be disassembled, whether that's with heat, whether it's with chemicals, whether it's with physical force, i.e. you cut it out or whatever else. And the balance is whether there's enough value in the materials that you're bonding together to be able to do that. Because when people talk about, well, is your sealant recyclable? Is your adhesive recyclable? It's the elements that are being bonded together. It's the elements that have a sealant in between them that are recyclable. It's not the bond itself. And I think it's getting over that aspect of it to understand that the adhesive and sealant component is so small compared to the bulk that you're never really going to be able to recycle your adhesive or your sealant. I mean, the best you're going to get is to be able to use it for energy recovery, i.e. you incinerate it and you recover the value through energy recovery. But what you do need to do is to have a system whereby if you've got valuable substrates that you are bonding together or sealing between, that when you remove that sealant or that adhesive, that you preserve the value in those substrates. It's very easy on something like, for example, a double glazed unit. It's a sealed unit. Glass itself can get remelted. The aluminium spacers can be removed. You could then incinerate the sealant for energy recovery, and it would be fine. So there are lots of different ways that you can look at this, and I think it's balancing that durability, dismantleability, hydrocarbon raw material consumption, and that balance between cost and end result can be quite difficult to justify. And then just as a kind of final point on that, when you're talking about bio-based raw materials, because I think that's the latest buzzword, you know, can adhesives and sealants use bio-based raw materials? Because if we're not on petrochemical, that's better. Well, it might be better or it might not, because if you're competing with food for your feedstocks, that's not good. And also, I think what you have to remember is most chemicals are commodity chemicals. And so they're based on the fact you've got large amounts of supply, so the price is low. If you start to introduce these specialty raw materials, bio-based, they're not produced in big volumes, so they're very expensive. And at the end of the day, there's a limit to what your end user is prepared to pay for his new product. If by using these wonderful bio-based raw materials, you've put your adhesive or sealant cost up by 10 times, nobody will purchase that. So it's that real different balance between all of those aspects that can be really challenging, I think, for an adhesive and sealant manufacturer.
Do you think they also act as barriers to entry then, or within adhesives and sealants?
Yeah, I think it can, and I think, you know, part of the problem is that we've got net zero requirements now, so you know, everybody's having to look at how are they going to get to net zero by a certain date, and so you need to know all about your scope 3 emissions, which is everything that is from your raw materials, and you just can't get that information. And so if you're a really small company, it's very difficult to be able to manage all those things because you haven't got the resources to be able to do it. If you're a really small manufacturer, you're not buying huge amounts of those raw materials. So your raw material supplier is less likely to want to give you the information you need because you're not a big customer. It's a commercial decision, isn't it? So I think, you know, if you were a new company setting up, I mean, certainly if I decided, okay, I've got some money, I'm going to set myself up as a sealant manufacturer, I'd think very carefully about it because of all of the chemical regulation, all of the net zero and sustainability. I think, well, actually, perhaps this isn't the business that I want to get into right now. And so it's very challenging because the reality is we need all these products and we need people to stay in business. And you don't want to lose that innovation because quite often the truly innovative products do come from the smaller startups. It's a disruptor or something like that. So it's trying to find that balance. I don't see much from government that is a willingness to actually look at that and say, well, what can we do to encourage this innovation? Maybe somebody will wake up at some point and do that.
Thank you for that, Lorna. Dennis, coming back to you, do you share the same sentiment as Lorna? Or?
Yeah, of course. That was well put up and well placed, well said, Lorna. If I just not elaborate, but just to add on to the same things what Lorna said, like if I touch base on the sustainability. Now, sustainability covers mainly 3 areas, which is the economic, the environmental, and the social matters. And what is important is that all the 3 needs to be balanced, because if we try to be driving one factor, say environment friendly, and it so happens then the cost becomes so high, then that becomes a big burden on the manufacturers to enter into the market. On the other hand, if you create something which say that is green, but just to create that you use lots of energy, then this is no longer a sustainable material. So within the construction industry, it is very important that we need to understand the sustainability in the whole, right? Now, the construction industry by its very nature is a big user of natural resources, just like Lorna was mentioning. But with growing concerns over the climate change and the finite nature of these resources, there is increasing pressure on construction firms to reduce their environmental impact. Now, to do that, we need to take into consideration what are the building regulations, what are the boundaries, what are the minimum expected expectation within those regulations. Now, we can argue that there are advancement in technology that is offering new possibilities in terms of embodied energy to use in the buildings and energy needs, but these are always a challenge that come across. What is a sustainable construction method? But in a brochure, if you look at what we actually looking for sustainable construction, some of the things, as Lorna said, we need to use a renewable as well as the recyclable materials. We need to reduce that embodied energy in a building materials, reduce the energy consumption of the finished building, reduce the on-site waste, and protect the natural habitats during and after the construction phase. And this is important in any part of the manufacture. It is not just limited to the adhesive and sealant, but they also play an important role in this aspect. Now, why is this sustainable construction important? Because it is just not from the point of the energy usage to emission. The construction industry has a huge impact on the environment, as we know. So aside from the loss of wild habitats and the development of the green field size, or this type of energy is used to in the sites where the construction phases. If you look at the different elements of it, it has a big role to play, right? Now, as Lorna was saying, if you use the adhesive and sealants, if the packaging is not right, if it is not disposable, if it is going into landfill, if the things which are chemically exposed become hazardous, and those things can contaminate the land, or it could have an effect on health and safety. So we need to look into how we can achieve that net zero operational carbon, net zero embodied carbon, sustainable cycle that we can use, sustainable biodiversity, good health and well-being. And the most important thing is it should lead to a sustainable life cycle cost itself, because it has an impact on the communities and the social care that we look for. And once you do that, then you can start reaping into the benefits of the sustainability of the construction, because the future that it looks up, when you look into it, the designers, the architects, all what they are looking into is how they can make the future buildings, the latest technology, all it is part of a sustainable construction. The whole cycle needs to be a sustainable construction. And at the same time, what we have seen is even the corporate world is looking into that sustainable mode, because that helps in their corporate social responsibility, that gives a higher credit rating, that gives them a higher CSR number, right? So this sustainable idea or sustainable manufacturing, or the process of the whole sustainability, needs to be in mind whatever we are doing on site.
That is very interesting. Thank you, Lorna. Thank you, Dennis, for answering all the questions so comprehensively and so clearly. That's the end of all my questions that I had. And I'd just like to, before I end the webinar, I just wanted to reiterate that the webinar has been recorded. And as soon as the webinar ends, we will upload the webinar on our social media channels as soon as we can. So please keep an eye out, and feel free to share the link with your colleagues. After the webinar, if you have any questions, please feel free to send a message through client services at bbasats.co.uk. Thank you for joining us. And we have no questions, Lorna and Dennis, so I think you've explained that all really well. So thank you for joining, and thank you for your time, and have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lorna. Thank you, Shumaila.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.